those. Just in summary, Mr. Ragasta wrote an opinion for the city of Warwick disagreeing with the arbitrator's ruling. Now he came before us a few weeks ago and said that his opinion wasn't worth the paper that it was written on. And I understand that that's a flip side, okay? So I understand that it must be difficult to flip like that, 180 degrees. But it is what it is. That's what he wrote. And as far as this fear, okay, this fear that we may lose, the fear was pointed out to us in September that what we have today for current employees and current retirees will bankrupt the city. And I don't know what the definition of insolvency is, but if your debts are $850 million, almost $1 billion, and your assets are around $160 million, I'd say you're pretty much there. You're pretty much there. And any judge looking at that, in my opinion, would analogize, and especially this Supreme Court, would analogize to the Providence and the Cranston cases, where there was a fiscal emergency. We can call it whatever you want, but 3-4 times, when you have debt that's 3 or 4 times your amount of assets, yeah, it's a fiscal emergency. And when I sit down and I look at the decisions that this council went through this past summer, where we had kids picketing City Hall because they didn't have enough money the school department didn't have enough money for after-school sports, after-school programs. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to, when these contracts come before us, 80% of our ability to change things are done when we ratify contracts. There's 20% left when it comes before us in May or June. So when you lock in deals like this, and you say to the school department, kids, you know, this is what we gave them because we couldn't give anymore because of contractual obligations, the first ones that get cut are the kids. The first ones that suffer are the people that get the tax bill, that because we're creating commissions to alleviate burdens on the people that got tax bills last year. And we seem to forget this. We seem to be in one realm 1 minute, and if it's convenient to be in the other realm. No, it's all together. These issues aren't isolated. They're together. And when you look at the qualifications that we talk about these individuals that gave us reports on whether we're going to win or we're going to lose in arbitration. I mean, Mr. Harrington, before he quit, had over 40 years of experience in interest arbitration. And he wrote many of the contracts that the firefighters that come before us today, many of the same provisions. And he listed for us all the things he was concerned about. And so did Mr. Conley. We're going to say that Mr. Conley's qualifications aren't good enough? Of course not. At the end of the day, you can pass contracts that someone can say, oh, well, maybe we'll lose in arbitration. The determining factor for any city or town is what's affordable. And that was laid out in March when the mayor gave his State of the City address. And he said what he was left over with. And I would agree with that. I would agree with the crisis that we were left with, that is an issue that we need to overcome. To know that what we pass tonight is going to repeat history on this council, 2012, 2015, and I remember talking to Mr. Ragasta this spring, where he said, hey, you folks should have been given the whole contract. It should have been underlined. The new provision should have been put in there. And I give credit to the administration. They did that, Mr. Augusta. They listened to you. And I appreciate it, because we didn't get that from the previous administration. We didn't get the full contract. The point is that because we didn't get those contracts, because we didn't know those provisions, we had grievances filed. Now, we're all in agreement that this contract isn't correct, that there's provisions in this contract that needs to be changed. Yet, we deserve to repeat the history and the mistakes of the past. Because just because the gentlemen that are running the union today are not going to be the ones that are running it 3, 4, 5 years from now. And everybody can have a different interpretation. It's what's in the border of the contract that counts. And this issue about health care, 2% is good for new employees. It doesn't address what the actuaries told us, which is current and retired employees. That's where the issue is. That's what's going to bankrupt this city. And to talk about 2% solving the problems when the city isn't obligated to put anything else in other than what the employees get, which we may see 25 or 30 years down the road, that's not addressing those issues, and that's not being honest with anybody in this room. I mean, when you vote on these contracts, you expect to get what we tell you you're going to get. Yet everybody in this room knows that they're not going to get that, because the actuaries told us they're not going to get it unless we fix the benefit structure. So what do? We kick the can down the road again. We're going to pass a contract that has provisions that we all agree are wrong, that have financial implications, that even the administration agrees we need to correct. For what purpose? So that we can rush through this? I mean, if a majority of this council wants this contract, that's fine. But at least pass the provisions that everybody intended to be in there at a bare minimum. And think about what we're doing when we come back in May. What are we going to say to the kids when we're talking about building a new high school? No? Or the fields. Over the last, in 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010, 4 new fire departments, 4 new fire buildings, firehouses, no new schools. I mean, that's the next generation that you want to come back here. So, at the end of the day, the OPEB costs right now for healthcare are over $400 million. This contract does nothing to address those. Absolutely nothing, even with the 2%. The sick days that we went through are now, again, clouded by written and numerical errors in the contract. A provision that says this contract comes before the ordinances of the city of Warwick. Talk about management rights. Talk about management rights. We can't pass ordinances that are inconsistent with this contract. Talk about giving away management rights. You can't even correct it if you pass an ordinance later on. Right now, there are ordinances on this book regarding health care and pensions that if we pass this contract haven't been amended and are going to be inconsistent. We need to make sure that what we pass, we understand is not going to prevent us from doing things in the future. In particular, as Councilman Corley said, the recent Supreme Court decision that came down that says that one of the firefighters who happened to smoke a lot claimed that there was a presumption that he had cancer as a result of his job duties. And that firefighter admitted that he smoked all the time. And the Supreme Court said, wait a minute, there's no such presumption that cancer is caused by your job. Well, in this contract, we'll give that away too. We'll assume that if you're smoking, it was caused by your job and not the fact that you were smoking, okay? So these presumptions that jobs instead of the environment, when the air quality in Rhode Island is an E, Kent County is an E, okay, is somehow related to the city of Warwick, that the taxpayers have to absorb, that if somebody gets cancer, it's our fault when the air quality is like it is? We saw what it's around the airport. So there are numerous issues that need to be corrected one way or the other. But I don't think that burden or those burdens represent what's fair and equitable to everybody in this room, especially when you know it's not going to come to fruition. Councilman Lattisaw, you had asked for a fiscal note on the issue of OPEB, correct?
Mr. President, I would like to also state for the record, based upon the Warwick Code of Ordinances, Section 30-6, it says, fiscal notes shall, whenever possible, cite effect in dollar amounts for the current fiscal year and estimates for the next 2 succeeding fiscal years. In the event that the fiscal effect commences or increases after this period, which is exactly what's happening here, on such additional costs shall be required. That's the basis for my fiscal note. We haven't gotten the answers, and I am requesting a fiscal note based upon Section 30-6.
So I call for a point of order.
I understand that. I'm just going to defer to the City Council solicitor for an interpretation of what that fiscal ordinance means and the language that Councilman Lattisaw had said.
If I could just have a moment to pull it up.
Sure. I have a copy of it.
Thank you. So at the risk of really just repeating for the record that section of the ordinance that was just written into the record by Councilman Lattiser, it read it correctly. It's that the fiscal note, this is 30-6, identifying the contents of the fiscal note. Provides that wherever possible, it should cite the effect in dollar amounts for the current fiscal year and estimates for the next 2 succeeding fiscal years. Goes on to say, as read by Councilman Lattiser, in the event that the fiscal effect commences or increases after that period, comments on such additional costs shall be required. So there's an existing fiscal note that is the issue raised by Council Lattiser, who is directed to the chair.
Okay.
So it's for the chair to determine as a point of order whether the existing fiscal note meets the requirements of that section.
Okay. Mr. Sinapi.
So, depending on the ruling of the chair, I'm going to invoke Rule 1 of our rules.
Okay. I just restate that. Okay, if you could restate that, what you said, Councilman.
Depending on the ruling of the chair, I'm going to invoke Rule 1 of the City Council rules.
So, Mr. Sinapi, before I rule on that, is it your opinion that the fiscal note that's currently before us that states that we shall have a fiscal impact on the costs of this contract, which go out, which we'll realize 25 to 30 years from now, is inaccurate in any way?
So I rely on the representations made by the Director of Finance and also on the plain language of the ordinances, which say for those future costs, there shall be comment. And there was comment, both in the fiscal note and in the testimony you heard, about OPEB costs to the extent plausible, given that none of it is really a sum certain. It's all based on speculation because these costs do not yet exist. It's not possible to have sum certains with things that are figments.
So you're saying that you can't project a 3-year cost or anything beyond 3 years?
I'm not saying that. I said I rely on whatever the Director of Finance said, and I'm also saying that the ordinance requires comment on those future costs, not sum certains to the extent requested here tonight.
So it says comments on such additional cost shall be required.
And those comments were included in the fiscal note.
And what were those comments regarding 25 years out? What was the savings? What were the costs?
I believe, according to the Finance Director, it was something along the lines of the 27 to 30% of savings.
Yeah, well, that's the savings. This says costs.
Right, and again, that's in regards to something that's a figment right now.
That's what? A figment?
Speculation, non-existent, because these people don't exist yet.
My question, Mr. Sinapi, is if you're going to calculate a 27 to 30% savings, at some point you had to be at 100. Can one of these people over here tell me what the 100 was?
You'd have to ask them.
Can anybody tell me what the 100 was? I mean, it's great to say you got a 27 to 30% savings, but you have to be able to say what the 100 is. You can't say that that's a figment. So that's what I was asking. What was the cost that they were using to figure out the dollar value of that 100% before they deducted 30%?
Fundamentally speaking, I'm no mathematician, but you don't actually need to know the sum certain to figure out what a savings would be if you're going by contributions made when you do know that, which is 2%. Just throwing it out there. And
So
either way,
this
I'd
says,
like a ruling by the chair.
this says costs. All right, guys. This says costs, what the costs are, not what the savings are. That's what the ordinance says. What are the costs?
I request a ruling by the chair on the point of order.
What's that?
I request a ruling by the chair on the point of order that the
So you
fiscal
don't
note
want
has
to
been provided.
engage in a colloquy about what
I'm
the
not
costs
a
are.
mathematician. You should ask the people
Well, I
here who
am.
are skilled in that.
Well, why doesn't somebody from the administration get up and tell us?
It's not my job. Ask them.
So is there anybody here from the administration that can tell us what the costs are?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I think we've asked that ad nauseum.
Okay.
And there is no answers.
Very good. Very good. So I need to make a ruling first, then your motion, okay? So my ruling is that it doesn't comply with the fiscal note that's required in an ordinance regarding costs. So that's my ruling.
So I appeal
Now you can
the-
make your motion.
I appeal the ruling of the chair and call for a vote to be taken.
Okay, so that's
Can't
second.
on a fiscal note.
On what?
I don't believe that can be done on a fiscal note.
It's on the point of order, not on the fiscal note.
It's on the point of
Well, I
order.
should- I should revise it
So
down to the
I'm going to
appeal.
defer to the city council solicitor, so we're all on the same page. If you could
So both the Rule 1 of the council rules, which is consistent with Robert's Rules of Order, provide that, as you just did, that the chair rules, any member of the body can call the chair through appeal, as Council Sinapi has. Doesn't need to be second. In that event, the appeal is submitted to a vote of the body, and the body's majority vote will become the rule for the body.
Thank you. So, Mr. Sinapi, you made the motion. Councilman McAllister has seconded, and Councilwoman Travis. Is there any, and Councilman McElroy and Howe. Is there any discussion on this? Go ahead, Councilman.
Just one additional quip. As far as the savings versus cost debate, if you're saying you're going to have a savings of 27 to 30% on a cost, you are actually commenting on the cost by definition. Although I don't think there's any reason to quibble over this because fundamentally, based on how it looks, I'd rather see the vote outcome.
At the end of the day, Councilman, they pay their taxes based on costs, not percentages.
Right, and they also know, because we've debated it ad nauseum, that they get a savings under this contract, and the alternative is to gamble with their money, which is a violation of fiduciary duty.
So we've had it. We've had the motion made. We've had it seconded. A yes vote, and you made it in your questioning. I just want to make sure that we phrase. I'll have you phrase the question, and then for the council to answer and what a yes or a no vote is.
So the proper question before the body, upon appeal from a member, is shall the ruling of the chair be sustained under Robert's Rules of Order? So a yes vote means that the ruling of the chair is sustained, meaning that your ruling, they essentially accept your ruling. A no vote means the ruling of the chair is not sustained. So it's almost, I understand that it almost seems the inverse of Councilor Sinapi's question, but if you're following Robert's Rules of Order, the question upon an appeal is, shall the ruling of the chair be sustained?
Thank you. So no other comments. The clerk will call the roll. Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
So we are back to the issue that was before us. And Councilwoman Travis, you have... Okay, there's a motion to move the question, seconded by Mr. McAllister, Mr. Howe, Mr. McElroy. So a yes is to... we have to vote on that.
Yes, so on a motion of a previous question or to move the question has been seconded, so that now becomes the primary vote, not the pending question on the ratification, so you need to vote on that first. A yes to move the question means that debate essentially ends debate.
Okay.
And then that requires the body to immediately vote on the principal question, which is the ratification of the contract.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on that? So a yes is to end debate, a no is not to end debate. Okay, if there's no questions, the clerk will call the roll. No.
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
Okay, so we've moved it. Is there any comment on the matters? I know it's been moved, so I guess we just go right into the vote. A yes is to approve the contract. A no is to not approve the contract, and the clerk will call the roll. Sorry. Okay. No.
No.
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
5 yeses. 5 yeses, 4 noes. It stands approved. You want to take a... You want to take a 5-minute recess? Steve, you want? All right, the next item on the agenda